the Ellen situation.
Yeah.
People found out that Ellen was mean, and all these people came out and said, Ellen's actually a bitch. And everybody, whoa, I can't believe it. And she lost everything. She fell apart, disappeared, because people found out that this character that she was portraying in a half an hour on a television show is not really who she was. My buddy Greg, who was one of her writers, was like, she's a piece of shit. And he was like, she's a monster.
On camera, she laughed while she badgered her staff. And so all good things must end. And also the Ellen DeGeneres show. Yes, the 83-year-old entertainer just announced that the upcoming 19th season of her show will be its last. Apparently, she created a workplace more toxic than an Amazon warehouse in Chernobyl.
Ellen DeGeneres once danced her way past tough questions, spinning awkward interviews into feel-good moments. But that charm wore thin when voices like Joe Rogan and Greg Gutfeld came crashing in like over-caffeinated wrecking balls at a daytime TV demolition derby. One minute, she's America's sneaker-clad sweetheart. The next, she's being dragged harder than a B-list actor in a failed reboot. What secrets did Ellen bury beneath that shiny studio floor? Spoiler, it's not, just glitter. Suddenly, her TikTok moves feel more like forensic evidence than fun.
Beautiful name, Isis.
Ellen's rough.
Ellen is like an old...
But it's a rough one now.
It's a rough one now because she was running Abu Ghraib in the back of her show. That's a rough one. She's out there dancing with Kristen Bell, and in the back, there's people that are getting up on the rack like this.
It's so weird when you see, like, a lot of people saying that someone who seems so nice is not nice at all.
She does.
Countless allegations surfaced last summer that the show's work environment was rife with harassment and discrimination. Following those charges, Ellen's ratings dropped faster than Kevin Spacey's pants at a boy band pool.
Ellen DeGeneres, the woman who preached kindness, then allegedly ran her talk show like a psychological obstacle course. Who knew the key to dancing into America's heart involved backstage tantrums and berating interns until their spirits shriveled like slugs in the sun? Turns out, the real show was off camera, but fear not. America, Joe Rogan and Greg Gutfeld have unofficially launched a crusade against the glittery illusion of daytime TV. One hosts a podcast that's basically the internet's man cave. The other is Fox News' idea of comedy and loafers. Together, their snark radars have zeroed in on Ellen DeGeneres, and let's just say the shimmer of her pastel set now gives off more DMV waiting room than America's feel-good queen.
Got a show business. Thanks. Yeah, because I'm mean. Yeah, you can't be mean and be in show business. No,
Ellen was crowned the Queen of Nice, until people realized nice apparently meant dishing out cold shoulders with a Stepford wife smile. The backstage legends are wild. Don't look Ellen in the eye, don't speak unless spoken. 2, and even then, pray you're not breaking her deep, meditative gaze into her own reflection. Interns were allegedly treated like decorative props, which is ironic. Most of them probably had more personality than the carefully placed fake. Plants on her set?
Seem nice, but that people have a very poor judge of character. She doesn't seem nice. It seems forced. People that are like that all the time, she doesn't seem nice. It's very forced. And whatever, you're allowed to be a bitch, right? You're allowed to be a bitch. You're allowed to be nasty to people. You're accomplished. You're a comedian. You did the whole thing. What you're not allowed to do is have a Guantanamo Bay situation in the backstage of your show where everybody's walking around afraid.
When Rogan caught wind of all this, you could practically hear his eyebrows shoot up across the country. The guy who chats with astronauts, conspiracy buffs, and bear wrestling survivalists was suddenly hooked on celebrity chaos involving vegan tantrums and scented candle tyranny. Naturally, Gutfeld joined the pile-on, tearing through the hypocrisy. Like it was a gluten-free cake Ellen had just hurled at an assistant for the unforgivable sin of forgetting her almond milk.
DeGeneres, bails for the UK. All right, I'm going to go to you first, Kat, because this is such I think you understand this story. So Ellen and her wife, Portia, have left their millionaire haven of Montecito for England. Now, they're saying they'll never come back in the wake of Trump's win. Do you think that's the reason why she's leaving?
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
I mean, Ellen got canceled for real a few years ago from just being a jerk.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't like a single comment she said or something she did. Just lots of people saying that working for her was a living nightmare and that she's a jerk. And I think that's probably why she wants to leave, because she hasn't really been able to make a call.
Let's be real, Ellen built an empire on quirky relatability. She danced, gave away toasters, and made Middle America believe their local Target cashier might be a hidden gem of humanity. But behind the scenes, let's just say the Wicked Witch of the West probably has better Yelp reviews. Former staffers whispered horror stories like they were pitching the next Netflix true crime doc. Toxic work environment doesn't even scratch the surface. It allegedly felt more like a psychological escape room disguised as a daytime talk show. Joe Rogan, who's interviewed everyone from Neil deGrasse Tyson to guys who eat raw, liver recreationally, was reportedly stunned that someone so associated with joy could allegedly make a salt mine feel like a day spa. He's met MMA fighters with more emotional range than what some say went down in Ellen's green room. And Gutfeld, he's been circling this moment like a golden retriever at a squirrel convention. Nothing gets Fox News giggling like tearing down a liberal icon, especially one with jazz hands.
They made progress with the strike.
They're picketing right now, so I think it's the early stages. I would think it might take a little bit with this one.
When someone crosses the writer strike, that's some dirty shit. They cross the picket line.
Yeah, I haven't seen anybody doing that yet.
I think Ellen did. I had a buddy of mine who was writing on Ellen. Everybody kind of knows now what she's really all about. And that's another one of those. Like, I'm so nice and I'm so sweet. Being behind the...
And yes, we're talking about the same Ellen who once stood on her pastel stage preaching compassion while allegedly firing staff for taking medical leave. That's not kindness. That's an HR horror story with a bowl cut and a megawatt smile. It's the kind of irony that even made Greg Gutfeld stop mid-smirk and mutter, maybe the whole be kind mantra should include not throwing staplers at people's heads. Then came the infamous I'm friends with George W. Bush moment, which sent her fan base into full-blown emotional cardiac arrest. Watching Ellen giggle with the architect of two wars felt like catching a vegan making out with a cheeseburger. The woman once hailed as the embodiment of progressive wholesomeness suddenly looked like she'd taken a wrong turn on a golf course and ended up casually co-signing the Iraq War. Rogan naturally didn't miss a beat. This is a man who's grilled physicists about quantum mechanics while barefoot. Ellen's brunch diplomacy with Bush was, to him, like a UFC fighter pausing mid-brawl to sign a peace treaty. And Gutfeld, he probably threw himself an imaginary parade. A Hollywood liberal caught laughing it up with a Republican? That's Christmas morning for Fox News, complete with smug confetti and the worst dancing this side of a campaign rally.
I was quitting, I would have not come back this year. I really did think about not coming back because it did, it was devastating. I am a kind person. I am a person who likes to make people happy.
No, the real reason, she says, is it was just too easy. Telling the Hollywood Reporter, quote, when you're a creative person, you constantly need to be challenged. And as great as this show is, and as fun as it is, it's just not a challenge anymore. Well, if that's true, here's an idea. When your viewership is down 43%, why not consider that the challenge?
Ellen tried to brush it all off by saying she's friends with everyone. That's cute, until your definition of friendship includes people who think empathy is a design flaw. That's not friendship, that's emotional hoarding. And when both Joe Rogan and Greg Gutfeld are pointing out your contradictions, congratulations! You've officially entered maybe the problem is you territory. Then came the apology tour after her show's alleged toxicity went full Chernobyl. Ellen responded the way any mega-rich icon with a PR team on speed dial would, with a carefully worded, barely there apology delivered in a studio full of staffers who were probably mentally calculating how many more months of emotional endurance it would take to pay off their student loans. It was the kind of performance that made soap opera actors gasp and say, wow, even I couldn't fake it that hard. Meanwhile, Gutfeld was practically doing somersaults over the hypocrisy. Daytime TV's Queen of Kindness caught in a scandal? That's his Super Bowl. And Rogan? He was likely floating in his sensory deprivation tank whispering, this is why I only trust chimps and stand-up comics. Because nothing says authentic like turning kindness into a branding strategy instead of, a personality trait.
When you become successful, you have to spend less time with people around you because you're servicing. Take Ellen DeGeneres, she's servicing millions of people in her show. Therefore, she has to kind of like mitigate or control the amount of exposure with actual real people. Does that make sense?
It does in theory, but when you, but I'm still always hanging out on the street and I'm super famous. But all these reports, there were so many of them of people being like, multiple people had the same story of her handlers, before an interview or anything with her, would come up and say, "Don't look."
There's something oddly satisfying about watching America collectively realize that Ellen's iconic smile might have been less sunshine in a bottle and more hostage in a toothpaste ad. The image, flawless. The vibe, immaculate. The reality, closer to if Willy Wonka ran his factory on passive aggression and overpriced matcha. Remember how she'd kick off every show dancing through the audience, arms flailing, hips kind of on beat, and the crowd would cheer like she just solved loneliness? But backstage, that same group of enthusiastic extras might have been the ones getting scolded for breathing too loud near her dressing room. It was like watching someone dance through a burning building while shouting, "Everything's fine!" And if you think Greg Gutfeld didn't turn that contradiction into comedic confetti, then you clearly don't know Gutfeld. He likely grinned like a gremlin on espresso while pointing out that Ellen's empire of joy had more structural damage than a sidewalk in an earthquake. As for Joe Rogan, he just laughed. Because of course he did. When you host a show where guests eat elk hearts and debate cryogenics, watching Ellen's pastel-colored PR meltdown unfold is just another Thursday.
But Ellen told the Today Show, home of Matt Lauer, that the bad press actually had nothing to do with her decision. Right, and the Titanic didn't hit an iceberg. It chose to.
The best part? The more Ellen tried to fix things, the worse it got. She brought in new producers, gave another heartfelt monologue, and tried to reclaim her spot as America's beloved nice lady. But by then, it was like trying to glue a piñata. Back together after the party, everyone had already seen the candy spill, and now she was just flailing around with paper mache in front of a crowd that wasn't buying it. Gutfeld had a field day naturally, comparing the whole debacle to the fall of Rome, if Rome wore Converse and made celebrities play charades for charity. And Rogan, he probably likened it to psychedelic ego death, except with fewer epiphanies and more HR complaints, because nothing says spiritual awakening like losing credibility in high definition. And let's not forget the celebrity guests. Some may have deserved the frost, but others looked like they were blinking Morse code for help between the forced laughs and rigged giveaways. Ellen had a gift for smiling while slicing, like Regina George if she had an Emmy and a midday time. Slot. Joe Rogan once sparred with Mike Tyson and walked away with all his teeth. That same man watched Ellen roast guests under the guise of banter and said, "Nope, too dangerous." And Gutfeld, he nailed it. If Ellen had a mustache and wore a red hat, she'd have been canceled before the next dance break.
Emily, I watched her comedy special. Mm-hmm. It was like a huge pity party. It was about how she was lamenting how her reputation has suffered. She's essentially as popular as a pit bull with monkeypox, but she's putting this on Trump. Do you think that she's going to be just everybody's going to love her in England?
Especially the jihadis who love the lesbians so much. They're going to love her there.
Even Ellen's attempts at humor started aging like milk left out on a sun porch. What once felt like cheeky banter gradually turned into microaggressions served with a smirk. It's not playful when the audience gasps before they laugh. This isn't comedy, it's Mean Girls theater with pastel upholstery. Meanwhile, somewhere, Greg Gutfeld is nodding while polishing his "told you so" mug. For years, he's been waiting for the moment when one of Hollywood's self-appointed morality gurus got exposed for treating kindness like a show, not a value. This was his Super Bowl, minus the athletes, plus way more smugness. Joe Rogan, ever the curious observer, probably filed Ellen under things that look harmless but bite, right between kangaroos and multi-level marketing schemes. Because when your reputation crashes faster than your guests' fake reactions, maybe it's time to rethink your life philosophy. And don't worry, Ellen's comeback attempts are just as deliciously cringeworthy. A new home goods line, a vague podcast idea, or maybe an apology-scented candle that smells like guilt mixed with mid-level anxiety. Classic Hollywood redemption. Deny, deflect, rebrand, repeat. Rogan would rather chew on drywall than buy Ellen-branded throw pillows. Gutfeld? He probably bought one just to mock it on air, holding it up like evidence in a trial about how not to run a talk show. Smells like regret and underpaid assistance, he'd quip. Believe me, Ellen's empire didn't fall from one mistake. It crumbled under the weight of 1,000 rehearsed, authentic moments. The dancing, giveaways, tearful surprises, all distractions from the slow, creeping rot underneath.
asked me, it was St. Patrick's Day, and Ellen asked me to dress as a leprechaun and come out on stage. And this is where, if you're wondering the low point of my career.
When you say she asked me, you're like, this is not a request.
It wasn't a request. I had to do it.
Yeah. You're doing this.
When you make an employee get in a leprechaun outfit and he's Irish, that's just cruel. That's racism.
Yeah.
I think that, why wouldn't that be? Think about other races. Would you have taken a Chinese employee on the Chinese New Year and put him in one of those big pagoda hats and made him dance to gong music?
Ellen DeGeneres built a career pretending every day was Christmas morning at an Apple store. Shiny, fake, and aggressively overhyped. But peel back that candy-coated exterior, and what do you find? A walking HR violation with a punchline. This isn't America's Sweetheart. It's daytime TV's version of getting handed a glitter bomb with a note saying, "Hope your insurance covers emotional trauma." She didn't host a show, she ran a psychological obstacle course with a smile so tight it could slice drywall. Staffers reportedly couldn't look at her, speak to her, or even exist in her radius without triggering full-on meltdown mode. That's not a workplace. That's a cult. Except the robes are pastel, and the Kool-Aid is oat milk. Her dance moves were a TikTok tragedy before TikTok existed. Every time she shimmed across the stage like a malfunctioning car dealership balloon man, you could almost hear a kitten lose its will to live. It was the visual equivalent of a dentist humming through a root canal. Bizarre, unsettling, and deeply unhelpful. And those celebrity interviews? Ellen treated her guests like contestants on Survivor. Public humiliation edition. Smile for the camera, pretend it's fun, and if you're lucky, you only leave emotionally scarred. If not, congrats. You're trending on Twitter with the hashtag #WhyISellin' She wasn't quirky, she was chaos in khakis. The only thing more staged than her giveaways were the spontaneous surprises, which somehow required 7 camera angles and a backup marching band. America thought she was their fun aunt, but she was the aunt who gives you cookies, then screams at you for touching the good towels. Ellen didn't fall from grace. She tripped over her own ego in designer sneakers, and the sound of that crash was glorious. That, my friends, is Ellen in a nutshell. A high production value facade of kindness built on a foundation of side eyes, canceled interns, and surprise public meltdowns. Rogan and Gutfeld just helped pull back the curtain. Behind it, not a wizard, just a bitter comedian in white sneakers with a master's degree in public manipulation. Now go forth, America, be kind. But, like, actually kind? Not Ellen.